All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How's everyone doing? Yay! Yay, I like it. There's some enthusiasm here. This is fantastic. It's great to have you guys in this new space. So this is pretty new here. We've been here about 3 weeks. What do you guys think of the loft space? Yeah, good, good. And hey, welcome everybody on Twitch as well. We've got a live feed and live stream here for tonight's announcement. So really excited to see you guys online as well. So thanks for joining us. My name's Aaron Kelly, and I'm a general manager in product marketing in AWS. I'm responsible for some of our compute services, including the announcements here today. So I'm really excited to be here to share with you some of our investments in Linux moving forward from AWS. So it's a very exciting time for us, and we're excited to kind of get your feedback on what we're building and what we're announcing today. Now, we're doing a little bit different event, a little bit different format. So we kind of have a smaller setting here. Gives you an opportunity to get some extras, kind of like the extras you get with Linux 2, if you guys have had a chance to take a look at it yet. So it's a smaller setting. We're going to go a little bit deeper with some exclusive content from the service leaders around what they built, more details around the announcements. There's a great hands-on area afterwards where you can get hands on the product, start to demonstrate it. But I think most importantly tonight, it's really about engaging with the engineers who brought you this innovation. So there's an opportunity to ask questions and really hang out with those engineers, give them feedback so we can really keep that cycle going here within the community. So we're really excited about this. Please give us feedback on this style of event because we're looking forward to doing this more and more often with some of these key feature launches. So with that, let me jump into the agenda here. And maybe I'll jump into the agenda. There we go. All right, there we go. All right, so I'll be MC tonight and kicking us off. Next up after me will be Nathan Thomas. And Nathan is a veteran of AWS. He's going to talk to you about Linux and a lot of the announcements today, go into more detail. Then we have our very own Jeff Barr, Chief Evangelist for AWS. How many people are here excited to see Jeff? Yeah, there we go, there we go. I see a lot of purple shirts in the crowd, so you got a following here, Jeff. So Jeff's going to give us a demo and talk more about this technology and how he uses it. Then we have this opportunity to shift into the other space where we're going to have some hands-on labs. There's going to be a fun trivia game, all right? So there's a little contest here. So based on the content you'll see during this presentation, there'll be a series of questions that you can answer. And whoever gets them all right has an opportunity to win a Kindle Fire, as well as an Echo device. So get your competitive juices flowing. There's an opportunity to win something here a little bit later. Of course, we'll have some drinks, some food, and just again, a great opportunity to interact with the engineers that brought you this technology. They're really eager to hear your feedback and start the dialogue. So with that, I am going to hand it off to Nathan. Now, Nathan joined Amazon in 2009, where he was part of the retail group, and he led the Linux platform investments there. Then he came over to AWS and actually led the first release of Amazon Linux in 2010. He spent some time in EC2 and the Fleet group, and most recently is the GM responsible for Amazon WorkSpaces. So Nathan's really well positioned to talk to you about all these great announcements tonight. So please welcome Nathan. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. Well, very, very excited to be here tonight. Great to see everybody coming out to hear more about Amazon Linux and about WorkSpaces. So really looking forward to getting to spend some time after the session as well. We've got a good QA time coming, and then feedback sessions. So as Aaron said, we've got a lot of folks from the team here who built the products we're describing tonight. And so a great opportunity to interact both directions and get some of that feedback going. So I've been with Amazon since 2009. Before that, I've spent a decade or more doing Linux-related activities at companies like Red Hat. And so it was really exciting for me back in 2010 to be part of the launch of Amazon Linux AMI. So just kind of thinking about the history of that product a little bit. When we launched, at the time, it was really the first operating system that was cloud first. So the idea of having an OS whose focus was to be a successful part of the development environment for a cloud just really hadn't been done before. And so that original version included some great utilities like Cloud Init. It included the AWS CLIs and SDKs, and it was integrated well so that it was easy to work with, and it was easy to launch, part of the quick start list, and it was easy to find and discover. So we did a lot of things just to make it easy to use Linux in the cloud. Of course, that original version, we took a pretty simple mentality, which was we're going to update it every 6 months. So every 6 months, like clockwork, there's been a new Amazon Linux AMI that's come out. That meant that everybody who was running an older copy on a server, they could always patch and provide updates to those instances. So you could pull in the updated versions, or you could move to the new AMI and get the latest and greatest. That included security patches. So we constantly release a stream of patches, and one of the big early decisions we made was that the default behavior was for every server to get those patches for security. So that meant that a lot of customers, I think, who otherwise necessarily wouldn't have gotten those patch sets applied, really got them kind of by default. So a huge kind of differentiator for us that was happening all the time. And so that's been out in market for 8 years, a pretty solid track record deliver those results over time. And of course now millions of instances of that launched and have been running. So it's the base for most of the AWS services. It's the base for Amazon retail. So it's a big part of what we do these days. But Jeff Bezos likes to talk about the divine discontent of customers, and it's absolutely what drives us. So we constantly get pushed for more, and the customers in this case have been no exception. So despite liking those capabilities and the way that Amazon Linux functioned as we launched it, they really want more. They want enterprise level support. So they want to go further on how well supported it is. They want a stable platform that they can build on and trust, but they also want to take advantage of all the latest and greatest in the Linux space, so things that are evolving fast, and how do they put that into their stable environments and be successful with it. They want to run it in the cloud, but they want to run it on premises, so there's hybrid interest. Can I put the same OS in both places so I can develop for both environments, or I can do dev and test in the same way each place? And then, of course, ecosystem support. So everybody wants to be able to download and install every package from every vendor and have it function in their environment. And so how do you have software vendor support? Well, today, I'm very excited that we announced Amazon Linux 2 LTS has gone GA. So very excited about that announcement. We really feel like this fulfills on a lot of those customer asks. So this is taking the Amazon Linux LTS 2 release candidate that we announced back at the end of last year and turning it into a full generally available release. This means that it gets full support from Amazon. And of course, the really exciting things we've announced, it's got a 5-year life cycle. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but you're going to get 5 years of updates and supports for the major release versions of Amazon Linux 2 LTS. In addition, it adds a new repository called Extras we're going to talk a little bit about, so you can begin to get some of that idea of pulling in some of those faster release cadences as well. And of course, it includes a wide range of updates to the package set for Amazon Linux, just constantly keeping up with the changes that go on in that community. So 4.14 kernel, glibc 7.3, GCC 7.3, glibc 2.26, updated bin utils, and of course, one of the big shifts we made with the move to Amazon Linux 2 was moving from init to systemd. So much more modern version of the primary management utility. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on under the hood here and some of the specifics that I just alluded to. So what is 5 years of LTS support? So this is the idea that we're going to take the patches that are released for updates for security and maintenance, and we're going to make those available as backported patches to older versions of the LTS releases for 5 years. So in the past, we would have released those updates, and you kind of had a rolling release where you had to upgrade everything else that might come along with a patch if you wanted to pull it in. In this world, you get that backport. That really lets you have a stable environment where your applications run against a very known set of libraries and utilities, and then you don't see those change underneath you as much, which means that if you built for it, you expect performance to be a particular way, you expect behavior to be a particular way, it's going to stay that way, which is pretty cool. So we talked a little bit about needing support from software vendors. We're talking about this robust partner ecosystem. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, so we'll come back to that in just a moment. One of the big things we did with this release is move to the Amazon Linux Extras repository. And so I think if you look at a lot of other distributions that are out there in the Linux space, they've taken a mentality of having a very long-term stable release and then having something that's more cutting edge and dynamic. But they're full distributions. One's kind of the stable enterprise version, and one's kind of this dynamic, changing, maybe not so stable version. And when we talked to customers, they said they were constantly having to pull stuff from that kind of more unstable version into the older or more stable version, and not necessarily feeling like it was supported, and maybe there were package dependency challenges. And so we tried to look at this problem a different way and sort of say, well, maybe we can have that more stable environment, but we can have that environment of faster moving packages available to run in that environment. And so that's what the extras concept is. We've got a core in the LTS 2 release that's supported for 5 years, and the list of that is all published on our website in terms of what that repo contains. It's most of the core runtime and executable components for Linux. And then we have the extras package. So you can get things like MariaDB or Node.js or Python components coming from that secondary package, which will be constantly revised and updated more on a pace with some of the open source community that builds those packages and then pull it into your environment. So pretty cool in that environment. And then, of course, one of the long-term questions we constantly got was, when can I get Amazon Linux to run outside of AWS? And that's finally the case. A lot of the containerization switch that's happened in the industry over the last several years made that a lot more realistic. And so we can now obviously use an AMI inside of EC2 to run Amazon Linux, but you can also do Docker, and so you can pull down Docker container images. And then on-prem virtual machines. So you can do KVM, you can do Oracle VirtualBox, you can do Microsoft Hyper-V, you can do VMware vSphere. So a wide range of on-premises virtual machines you can download and you can use locally. And of course, all of that's at no cost, so you can pull those down and you can run them at no additional price. So I kept pushing off on the ecosystem. We did a lot of work up front. We wanted to come in with a pretty good set of partners that we work with on Amazon Linux 2 on day one for the GA. I think we've got a pretty good group here of the types of tools and ISV applications that customers really expect to see for administration and management and execution in their Linux environments inside of EC2. And so, folks like Chef and Puppet, and Vertica, SignalFX, these are the types of partners that our customers are asking for. But of course, this is really day one on this program, so we're going to keep pushing and adding more and adding more. And we really want to put our customers in a position where they can expect that things will work on Amazon Linux 2 out of the box. But continuing that theme, every time we talk to customers, they always continue to want more, and we're happy to get that feedback and keep driving that innovation cycle. So talking to customers, what we heard was they want to have a graphical development environment for Amazon Linux. So it's great that we've got this environment that's in the server, but they find that they're developing on a different Linux so that they can do the designs of their applications they're going to roll out to the cloud. Could we maybe get all of that in the same environment? They want to develop on the same base they deploy to. So give me the same GCC, the same glibc, the same bin utils. Give it all to me in a place where I can do my development graphically. They want that to be managed. So there's a lot of complexity about picking things for desktops. And so could you just maybe make that a managed environment? They want it to be pay as you can go. So can I have it be something where I only need to pay for it when I'm using it? And so I can stand it up and shut it down depending on what my current needs are. They want it to be simple. So don't make me go through a lot of rigmarole to launch it or maintain it or manage it. And then they wanted to be able to use it from anywhere on any device. So don't make me tie my developer desktop to a particular client device, my particular laptop or particular tablet that I'm connecting from. So also very happy to announce today the launch of Amazon Linux WorkSpaces. So Amazon Linux WorkSpaces are built on top of Amazon Linux LTS 2, and then building on top of that base, adding a set of desktop packages coming from core and extra repos. It's really designed to provide the exact same high-quality streamed desktop experience as Amazon WorkSpaces already provides, but then bring that into the Linux environment. And of course, a core target for us is developers. So we really want to have developers have a phenomenal experience running on top of Amazon Linux, and do that in a graphical manner so they can develop for their application sets that are going out into EC2. But we also hear customers telling us they want to use it for kiosks and places where they really have only a single application that needs to run in a desktop or graphical environment. Also hearing from customers who want to use it for office productivity. So places where they don't necessarily have as much reliance on some of the Microsoft product set or applications, but can use the tools that are available inside of the Linux environment. So we launched with 11 regions, so the 11 regions where WorkSpaces already runs today. We launched with 6 clients, so you can run it on Windows, Mac, thin client devices, Chromebooks, Android, and iOS clients. So you can connect from any of those types and get access to the streamed graphical output of your workspace. We also launched with 4 bundle types, so you can launch with our Value, Standard, Performance, and Power bundles. And those range, depending on the amount of CPU or RAM you want. You can run from 1 vCPU up to 4 vCPUs. You can run from 2 gigs up to 16 gigs of RAM. And then, of course, you can tailor the disk that you need to your specific needs based on that. Now, I did want to step back right quick, because obviously we're talking to a lot about Amazon Linux. I know a lot of you are Amazon Linux fans. How many of you actually have launched or run an Amazon workspace? Okay, so maybe, 20%. So just want to make sure everybody understands what an Amazon workspace is and why it's kind of relevant to this Amazon Linux community at the same time. So Amazon workspaces are really simply desktops running inside of the AWS cloud. Right, so standing up either a Windows 7, a Windows 10, or now in this case, a Linux desktop, and then streaming the video output from that. So that is, instead of having a video adapter connecting directly to a screen on a laptop, you've got an instance running in EC2, and you're streaming the video output down to a client running on whatever device you want to connect from. Then we're capturing your keyboard and mouse movements and streaming them back up into that environment. And so you're interacting with the desktop. It looks and feels just like your normal desktop. It's just actually running in the cloud. You kind of can't tell the difference. So the experience should be basically the same, but your desktop experience is not tied to your client device anymore. So you can connect from a Mac or you can connect from an Android device and still get to the apps you want in Windows or Linux, which is pretty cool. So at the same time, we really wanted to make it solve some of the challenges that people have had with virtual desktop environments in the past, VDI. So it's a much simpler process. You stand them up in 10 or 15 minutes. We take care of a huge amount of the administration and management. So you don't have to become an expert in a lot of the VDI concepts to take advantage of this globally for your whole company, which is pretty cool. So we launched in 2014. Since that point, we have tens of thousands of customers running hundreds of thousands of workspaces. It's gotten to be a pretty common use case for our customers. And so talking about that a little bit more specifically, just some examples of customers that are running workspaces today. Indamal Shine is running workspaces. They've got video production crews all over the world that make video content for shows like The Biggest Loser and some of the things that they produce. And they have to stand up those video production crews in different parts of the world. They might operate for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then they need to shut them down. And yet those guys need desktops to be part of the corporate network and do email and have access to all of the assets they want. And they need to be able to do that quickly, shut them off at the end of the day, and then walk away from it. So WorkSpaces is perfect for that. Just stand up the desktops when you need them, turn them off when you're done. Cornell is using it to avoid building new buildings. So in the past, they would have to use a bunch of classroom spaces as lab spaces for students. And now they can just use workspaces for those labs. So the teachers can go ahead and create the content they want so that, in particular in engineering disciplines, they can have access to the apps, but they don't have to go schedule lab times and actually get more lab space built. So pretty huge capital difference for them. Pfizer uses it for their mobile sales forces who need access, who are going out to the mobile environments with iPads and need to be able to get to corporate apps on the Windows environment. Autodesk uses it for things like Autodesk University. So the thought of going and buying thousands of GPUs to stand up Autodesk applications and then getting done with them in a week and trying to figure out how to reset with that capital is pretty bad. So how do you do that with just using workspaces? So spin up some graphics workspaces. And then University of Maryland, University College is using it to build an entire student desktop environment. So for distance learners who can do interaction with apps that are needed for classes. So a huge number of fascinating use cases. We talk to customers all the time. They're just doing all the things that are kind of hard to do with a traditional desktop or laptop and solving it with workspaces. Now, I've been doing the Linux thing for a while. One of the things for probably 20 years, I've heard somebody say this is the year of the Linux desktop. And it has been an utter failure in that regard ever since. It's never happened. I'm not going to remotely try and make that claim. But I do want to say there are some reasons I really think what we're doing here is a little different and why I think it solves some of the pain that has been out there in the past. One is that it's really simple and curated. So I think one of the failings or challenges of Linux on the desktop in the past has been kind of this tyranny of choice problem, where you just have too many options. There's too many different variants, too many different things to pick from. It just gets overwhelming, and particularly if you're corporate IT. I don't know, how many people have tried to get your corporate IT organization to support Linux inside of your environment? It's a little tricky, and part of it is that kind of, wow, there's a lot of choices. So we're trying to provide something simple and straightforward and easy. So you get Firefox, you get for web browsing, you get Evolution for mail, you get LibreOffice for office and productivity. Then you get the Linux Extras repos for additional packages. So just try and keep it nice and simple and easy. And then, of course, you can easily rebundle it. So as with Windows Workspaces, configure it how you want it, snapshot it, and turn it into the base for what your future users are going to launch. The other thing is we bundle the hardware. So one of the major challenges with Linux has been which laptop or desktop am I going to buy, and is Linux going to run on it? And then I go buy an upgraded one, and is that going to work or not going to work, and which peripherals? And I think this is where Apple really figured this out a long time ago with getting BSD to work underneath Mac OS and curating that hardware set. So we're the same way. We've got a narrow set of bundles. You know that the hardware works. Connect from whatever device you want. But at the end of the day, the hardware is going to work because it's just an EC2 instance underneath the covers. And we're going to be doing all the management on that. We've really given a great user experience. And this is not just that the session experience is great. I mean, obviously, the streaming has to be phenomenal. It's also that they can connect from any device. So they pick the device that they want and that they love, and then they interact with a workspace that gives them the desktop that they need for their particular productivity environment for their company that they're working with. So it separates some of that user choice element out, which is pretty big. It plays well with existing tools. So all of the things developers want, of course, are there. So GCC and glibc and those kind of tools that they expect to develop for their AWS environments they're going to deploy to, CLIs and SDKs for AWS. But all of the things your IT org needs to administer it like a server, so Chef and Puppet and Ansible, those all work just as well. And it also integrates with Active Directory. So workspaces are domain joined on launch. You use your AD creds to log in. Again, when you think about your IT org saying, it's just kind of click to launch a new Linux workspace, 15 minutes, it's no longer a really complicated decision to just say, yeah, I can support that. It integrates with AD. I can push policy on it. I've already got your auth and IDs set up. So really, really big in that regard. And of course, that extends with integrated security and auth into things like multi-factor auth. So if you're doing Radius MFA, then that just works through the Workspaces client. And again, you're using your one-time passwords for access and auth control. And then, of course, it's more affordable. So Amazon Linux is priced at the same as our BYOL offerings, or Bring Your Own License offering for Windows. So effectively, same story. You don't have to pay the Windows license, so the pricing winds up being the same. So to give you an idea, for a standard workspace in US East, that's $35 a month for an always-on workspace. If you talk about an AutoStop workspace, at the lowest price point, it's $7.25 a month, and then 17 cents an hour. So it really gives you the chance to pay only for what you need when you need it. You needed a developer desktop on Linux running for just a few hours a month, stand it up, pay 17 cents an hour, shut it down. So a very, very different cost model. And so you can really layer it into an existing plan a lot, from an IT perspective, a lot more easily than you have in the past. And if you decide you don't want it, you walk away from it. It's like the rest of the things in the AWS cloud. There's not a minimum purchase commitment, and when you're done, you stop paying for it. So it's an easier decision for a lot of people. So again, I'm not making any broad claims, but I do think there are some differences here that are going to make it take away some of the back pressure on why people have struggled with Linux inside of the corporate environment in the past. All right, so with that, I really want to thank everybody again, and I want to invite Chief Evangelist for AWS, Jeff Barr, up, and he's going to help give us a demo. I will say Jeff Barr has been probably the single most vocal and helpful with feedback WorkSpaces user we've ever had. I will say some of these slides speak directly to Jeff's feedback, so I hope you're happy, Jeff.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to get connected up here. I have a question for you about LTS.
Okay.
So, how do I put this? Okay, so you give me the LTS, and to me it's kind of like a milk carton, and it says best if used before X date.
Okay.
Do I have to wait 5 years until you ship another carton of milk, or and if 2 years from now, if I need milk, do I get a 3-year carton of milk, or how does it work?
I see where you're going. So to try and paraphrase, what you're saying is, am I going to get an Amazon Linux LTS 2 release, let's say today, and then it's going to be 5 years until the next major release comes out, and we're only going to be backporting until that point?
Exactly.
No. So
well, that's good.
So there will be subsequent major releases in the meantime. What we're saying is that the patches and upgrades will happen for a minimum of 5 years back to that one that came out today. And then at some point, you can decide when you want to transition to subsequent ones. I should comment that the Amazon Linux AMI, prior to this, will be supported till 2020. So for customers doing the transition to Amazon Linux 2, there's a pretty good lead time here to kind of make that investment and make the change.
Got it. Okay. All right. Now I understand. Okay. So thanks all for coming. I love to demo things, and I'm here on Wi-Fi in our brand new loft, and I'm demoing brand new Amazon Linux workspaces. And so let's hope that the odds of demos are in my favor tonight. So I'm here actually on my regular laptop. Now, the way I work, I don't actually do anything of value on my laptop. My laptop is nothing more than a great place to run the WorkSpaces client. So if I'm at home, I've got a nice 2-big screen Windows desktop. It just connects to my workspace in the cloud. At the office, I don't have a laptop. I don't have a desktop. I have this tiny little box called a Zero Client, and the Zero Client just connects up to my workspace. So regardless of if I'm at home, if I'm here, I'm at the office, and if I'm at a hotel, in an airport, I'm always connecting to the same workspace. And regardless of the quality of connectivity, I don't have to worry about if I want to do a big download, am I going to hit some kind of a limit on download speed or amount I can download. I'm always able to access that same live workspace. So I launched a client. I'm just going to go ahead and log into my client. So it's going to connect up to my workspace.
And these clients are, like I said, are available. You can download this client from clients.amazonworkspaces.com. You can download it for Mac. You can download it for Android devices, iOS devices, Chromebooks. So there's a wide range of connection options here.
So here I am running in a window, and one quick keyboard shortcut with Control-Alt-Enter. And now the workspace takes over my entire desktop. And looking at this desktop, I can't tell that it isn't running locally.
Yeah.
And I had no experience with virtual desktops before I started with workspaces, and I really didn't know what to expect. But whenever you think about accessing remotely, you think, well, there has to be some kind of a catch. It has to be imperfect, or there has to be some speed issues or responsiveness issues. But I'm fairly demanding. I'm really intense on the keyboard and on the mouse, and it just feels like a local machine. So let me just show you a couple things. I've got lots and lots of things I might have time to demo here. It is dialed into my corporate Active Directory. Right now, for demo purposes, we're just connected to a demo directory. So if I was connected to a real corporate directory, I'd be able to launch the Evolution client and show you how to access my email. There's probably all kinds of proprietary stuff in there, so I probably wouldn't want you to see that. See that anyway.
I will say this: we do have Evolution on some of the demo kiosks out here, so if people want to play with that. That's the productivity suite. suite I'm sorry, not productivity suite. That's the mail calendaring task suite that we're shipping with.
Okay, so I could do email there if I'd like. We probably don't need to do that, so we can kill that. But I am running at a shell. Let's pull up the shell and let's see, make sure that's big enough to actually see. Let's see, view and zoom in. Okay, I'm at a shell, and it is regular Linux right here. I can check out my free space. I can take a look at my running processes.
Yeah, and to be clear,
kernel messages.
You get root access. I mean, obviously, you can if your IT org wants to cut that off, then they could do that. But the default is that you're going to be able to do sudo and get root access and make the changes.
So if I wanted, we mentioned the Linux extras, so I can list those. Let's see, that's just Amazon Linux extras like that, and I can see the set of extras that are available. I can see the extras that are already enabled. If I would like to install something new. Sudo and install text editor.
And the extras packages are put into what we call topics. So there's some segmentation in the extras packages. So there's some developer-focused topics and desktop topics. So you can do some level of visibility control on what folks can have access to as well that way.
There we go. So I quickly installed the Emacs topic and up and running. Now, despite the speed or the lack of speed I might have had on my local network, we were downloading at the speed that EC2 connects to the outside world at the home of the workspace. So that's right. Super, super important from a speed and connectivity and performance point of view.
These, we didn't even think about it. These are, of course, both just running on the local Wi-Fi in here to connect to the workspaces. But Jeff is right. The connections from an EC2 instance in terms of upload and download speeds are way faster than most end users would have on local machines like this.
In fact, I was cloning some GitHub repos earlier, and they ran at many, many megabytes per second, which you might or might not be able to do if you were running locally. All right, so much for Emacs. What else might we be able to do that is interesting? Okay, so there's our extras. We've got those all listed there. Now, maybe tell us, will more extras be added to this list over time?
Yeah, so a couple of different things on the extras stuff. So we're constantly adding things into extras, both on the desktop side and on in terms of other things you might want on the server front. And then over time, the idea is that some things will become stable and move into core. So there's some things that may ultimately transition into the LTS approach. And so that'll be something you'll see in the repos over time.
Yeah. Now, one thing I do understand, we do have an extra here that is Docker, and I don't have a lot of detailed understanding of the details of the versioning of Docker, but apparently it changes really, really quickly. But a lot of the clients are heavily dependent on a particular version, so the ability to get access to newer versions of Docker when you need it, but to lock down what you're running to a very, very particular version is apparently important to Docker users. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
So.
Okay, let's see. On the productivity side, of course, we've got the LibreOffice. We've got all the cool apps right here. And there we go. We've got Writer. This is some text. I hate this keyboard. Like that.
Like typing with people watching.
Yeah. This is not my favorite keyboard either, but here we go.
That's what the text says.
Yeah, I know. So all the LibreOffice applications are installed there and available. So we can install from extras. We can also install just regular old packages. We could install yum install Inkscape like that if we liked.
And so these are pulling, the default configuration is you'll have core and extras repos, but of course if you want to add additional repos, there's a lot of other stuff out there, that are effectively anything that's going to be in that kind of CentOS kind of mentality is going to be pretty installable.
Yeah, so I've got very simple, easy to understand or install. I still have no artistic skill, even if I have a really cool...
Linux does not provide that.
I know. I've bought any number of drawing tools, and I still can't draw to save my life. Let's see, other things that are interesting to know about. When you are running in here, you are inside of the AWS environment, and so you've got the AWS tools, so I could do AWS S3 list, for example. Oh, well, that worked really well in my previous testing. So
the AWS Access Key ID you provided does not exist in our record, so you may have a credits problem. Just to be clear, the way that the workspaces are launched is they get an ENI or Elastic Network Interface, effectively a second VIF. That shows up inside of whatever VPC you've launched your workspaces in. So the directory itself, when you configure Workspaces initially, will be in a VPC. You can get access to the resources in that VPC. So if you want to use your Workspaces to access other AWS resources, you can do that directly through that VPC. You own all the ACLs on that, so you can set whether those have network access externally or only are limited to a certain set of ranges.
Okay, let's see, other things to show. What else did we want to show? Oh, we want to show video, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's do
Let's do some video. Okay, so let's open up Firefox here. Somewhere I had Firefox running.
So it's kind of a crazy scenario, because you think about it, we're going to watch a video on his workspace in Oregon, right? Mm-hmm. And so that means we're going to obviously do stream content to get to the workspace, then he's going to open a video, it's going to do the download and decode, and then re-encode and send it down to us. But it all works.
Oh, yuck. No.
The gray-haired Jeff Barr.
Yeah,
you want to tell everybody how your hair became purple?
Oh, yeah, good story. Okay, so it's actually your team's fault.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I was working with Workspaces a couple years ago, and we were actually negotiating to get the newest bundle, the Power Bundle, I think it was.
At the time,
and after Nathan's team releases it for public use, there's a little bit of bureaucracy inside the company to make it available for employees, and they were somewhat non-committal on an actual date, and we went back and forth on dates, and out of desperation, I named a date and said, okay, if you are done by June 15th, I will dye my hair purple as a thank you. And it went from undetermined within a scope of multiple months to suddenly they were very, very excited about
June 15th.
That
is exactly right.
Sometimes putting that little bit of personal energy into it will actually help move things forward.
We were blown away that you didn't welch on the bet. So
absolutely not.
Worked out well.
Absolutely not.
So.
All right, I don't have anything else to demo. Perhaps we should answer some questions now.
Yeah, so I think we're ready for some Q&A. I know on the Twitch stream, folks have been submitting some questions as well. But if anybody in the room has questions, there's a mic coming around, and then we'll just kind of pop it back and forth. So I think we've got plenty of time. So yeah, go ahead.
Can you tell about backups and possibility to reset to some particular state? Is it possible, and how does it work?
Mm-hmm. So the question was about backups and how you reset to a particular state. So slightly different answers for Windows workspaces and for Linux workspaces. But in both cases, they back up every 12 hours by default. So we back up the D drives in the case of the Windows environment, and we back up the /user or /home partition in the case of the Linux workspaces. And so the idea would be if you had some sort of a challenge or corruption or problem in root, in either case, that you could then rebuild and recover all of your data from the user profile, so the user partitions or portions. And so there's an option when you're using the workspace, either the APIs or the console, called rebuild. So you just do an AWS rebuild, it recovers from your last snapshot, and you're up and running again.
Actually, that's a good thing we didn't really mention is that all of the workspace administrative functionality is accessible via CLIs and APIs, so people can build management tools and management portals around workspaces that will now work both for Windows and for Linux.
Our customers have done some incredible things with it. So I mean, just built rich internal integrations with their existing tools for end users. There's a whole kind of push from our customer base to stop having their end users have to go to help desk. So how can we just let them help themselves? And doing things like rebuild via the API is one of those big ways. And of course, that backup capability is just part of the bundled price, so there's no additional fee for the storage of those backups. Yeah. Oh, do we have a mic?
Microphone or
talk
loud like I'm good at doing?
I think for the Twitch stream, we better have the mic coming. So
I'll walk it over and ask a question at the same time. Is there any difference in pricing on Docker or who was it, by the way?
Or on running an EC2
or on-prem? Yeah.
So if you download Amazon Linux for things outside of EC2, then it's all the same. If you want to run it on Docker in EC2, then you're just going to pay the standard Docker fees, standard EC2 fees. So anything that you're running inside of that, or EKS or ECS, like it's all going to be the standard fees for those. There's nothing additional for Amazon Linux. So it is, I mean, for EC2, it is AMI runtime. So effectively for EC2, if you run an Amazon Linux AMI or Amazon Linux 2 LTS, it's just standard EC2 pricing. So that's when you look at the pricing for EC2, it'll have Linux, it'll have Windows, for example. It's just the standard Linux pricing. Does that make sense?
But the Docker is
I don't know if is there a separate answer for the Docker pricing? I think that's all just the same, right? So this is our product manager for the Amazon Linux product.
Hello, folks. Now, if you run Docker environments inside of EC2, it's just the EC2 compute pricing that applies. The OS is always free, like Nathan mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't know if you were trying to ask about EKS or ECS or one of the other containered environments. Or. Oh, no. No. See, the question was, is there kind of layered billing? No. It's all just one EC2 environment for us, so it's just standard EC2 pricing. Yeah.
At what point for machine learning or AI, as this for a developer workstation, will I be able to specify a particular GPU, like I want an NVIDIA 700 or whatever? Is this coming? Is this there and I haven't seen it?
Yeah. So today for Linux, we don't yet support GPUs for workspaces. And I assume you mean in the workspaces context. For Windows, we do. So today you do get, you can use, it's the NVIDIA K520 grid card that comes with the G2 today. As we expand that set over time, which we have not made any commitments to, but if that were to happen, I think you'd have specificity based on which bundle type you would launch. But yeah, today it's the NVIDIA card. So you can specify it, it's just one of them.
But only for Windows?
Only for Windows today, yeah, that's correct.
Is that the issue because in the VM, I'm not allowed to have multiple, the actual physical hypervisor, I'm not allowed to allocate multiple GPU cards to different virtual machines?
So the question was whether the issue here is that you can't allocate multiple GPUs to single physical cards. Today, just on the products that we have for workspaces today, it's just a defined single bundle size. So it's really just one instance type effectively. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So I guess I have two questions. One is, does your AWS CLI, to your configuration, conventionals, et cetera, follow you around across workspaces on different devices, or if you do updates to them? And also, what about Chrome DevTools? I guess that's not really your highlight, but any issues with it?
So I didn't fully understand that first question. I apologize. It was about whether your profiles or preferences will go between workspaces. So if you're talking about, I'm going to try and answer a question that I hope is what you're asking. So if I've got a different client devices that I'm connecting from, for example, then the workspace is largely going to be exactly the same depending on whichever client device I come from. There can be some slight differences. So for example, if your printer is connected on one local client device, will it show up or not show up in those kind of environments? There also can be some differences on things like screen size. So that'll shift the resolution or it'll shift the window sizes a little bit depending on where you connect from. You can also get some inversions on things like, if you've got double touch scrolling that's slightly, that's maybe backwards from one or the other depending on the client type that you connect from. So there's a lot of little nuances that we have to think about in terms of the way that connection experience works. And then in terms of Chrome development tools, from our perspective, really it's the Linux and the Windows desktop environments that you're running inside of. Those will be consistent. So if you wanted to do Chrome development inside of Linux, I could see that being a thing that you could do and install the application sets for. And I think that would run just like any other Linux desktop at that point. So I don't know if there's anything specific that we would do for that environment, but I think it would work. All right, I'm learning that I have to get the mic before I point to somebody. So.
Yes, all right.
Thanks.
There we go.
The communication protocol between the client and the workspace. One, is it encrypted? And two, how performant is it over a crappy cellular connection?
Yeah, totally. So question, around whether we can, what the protocol needs and whether it's encrypted. So all of the initial connections, so when you log in, that's a separate process, and that login is TLS1-2 encrypted. So we always, all of the login steps are protected. Then once a session is initiated, it's AES 256 encrypted. And so all of the in-flight communication from a workspace gets encrypted at the workspace, decrypted on the client side. And so there's no visibility to that. There's never any data stored on the local device, and there's nothing visible in the middle of that. And then there was a follow-up about performance of that. So can we handle bad Wi-Fi or bad telephony scenarios? And there's always boundary conditions, but what we generally see is if your networking is down to, let's say, a couple of hundred kilobits, we can handle it. And below that, it starts to get too low to be able to handle it. Some of this depends on the type of workload that you have. Like if you're doing 4K video at high frame rates, that's going to be more challenging. If you're doing, I've got a desktop where I'm doing kind of office productivity and it's kind of lightweight levels of change going on, then it'll absorb lower. And then
it's only transmitting changes as opposed to full screen refresh on every frame.
Oh, there's a very complicated set of algorithms on the back end for that. Yeah, so it's actually doing all kinds of detection of squared environments. Oh, you're connected to Linux on your iPad.
I was working on Caltrain on the way up.
Nice.
Installing software packages that
Nice. So iPad connectivity from LTS. Yeah, I mean, so we do LTS pretty well. Anything latency-wise, we'll accept up to a couple hundred milliseconds of latency round trip time. It's pretty surprising how high it'll go and still be totally usable. People tell us all the time they connect from planes, the tolerance. A, networks are getting better every day. B, the tolerance is pretty high.
Yeah, also another way to think about security, your question, is there's nothing of any value here on my laptop besides my stickers. The rest of it is safely stored in the cloud, and I believe that we all, if you carry local data on your laptop, we have some low-level background anxiety, always worried about possibly losing your laptop and the valuable stuff on here. And once you have everything in the cloud, you suddenly think, you don't think about it being volatile, you don't think about any risk of losing it, you're carrying around access to it versus carrying around the data. And I can give you the facts, but the experience of being freed from that little tiny background anxiety is actually kind of freeing, I have to tell you.
So a couple of questions from Twitch I wanted to jump on as well. So will there be EPEL support in Amazon Linux 2? EPEL's a very popular external repository. We don't officially support EPEL. The reality is that the binaries are quite similar. So if you want to configure the EPEL repos and do installations from them, I think you'll find most of that functions and works. There's a question about will AWS support desktop apps on Amazon Linux 2 like Evolution or LibreOffice, or only things that are not in extras? We do actually ship by default Evolution and LibreOffice, so there's a lot of apps that are in there, and we will support those the same way we do every other Amazon WorkSpaces product. So you still get call-in support and the same mechanisms you have today if you're an existing AWS support customer. So I think we've got a couple more brewing, but maybe we should take a few more on. Yep.
Hi there. I'm wondering, are the instance types a small set, or can you do like the T types? So maybe if you're compiling, you can burst, but most of the time you don't need it?
Yeah. So a question around whether the types are, whether you're kind of set in stone on those types. So it is a curated set, so we don't offer every single EC2 instance type. There's gotten to be quite a number of them. And so we try to really make sure it's going to be a very nice experience for desktops and kind of matches up to the needs of desktops. But it is easy to switch between them. So if you launched a workspace, let's say that you've launched it as a value bundle, and then you say, oh, I really need a performance bundle. I'm finding I'm running out of horsepower. You actually just either in the API or in the console set that you'd like to change it, and then you reboot and you come up in the other type. So you don't have to really spend a huge amount of time thinking about whether you're on the right type. You just basically can pretty quickly change between those types.
I've actually got that up there right there.
Oh, okay, cool. So on the Modify Workspace. We actually have a lot of people who've extended this with the APIs, so they've given their internal employees the ability to change. And so the employees just kind of bounce back and forth from a portal. They don't have to ask for help to do this at all. So it's been pretty powerful. Yeah.
I've got two quick questions.
Yeah.
The first is, can I use like roles with these workspaces with individual roles?
You mean like IAM roles?
Yeah.
So inside of the workspace, the answer is kind of no. So the workspaces themselves don't show up as EC2 instances directly in your console, for example. They are managed objects that are workspaces. For doing things where you want to use them, they really show up more like, let's say that you had an on-premises desktop and we're using it to administer and manage AWS actions, you would need to be providing in creds to take actions with other resources in AWS.
Okay, so credentials would have to be stored on the instance.
Correct,
itself.
right. I mean, really, it's done more like like a Windows desktop is a domain joined device, and it really shows up as a computer in the Active Directory environment, and that's the cred set and the user set it knows as the users from AD. That's how WorkSpaces really functions, rather than having the identity and auth really be handled at the AWS level.
Okay. And then my other question is there an easy way, maybe through the client or something like that, to download files for offline use?
Yes. So there is a capability to use Amazon WorkDocs. So WorkDocs is actually a bundled partner for us. So we do a 50 gig WorkDocs share as part of WorkSpaces. And so when you launch a Windows workspace, that means you actually have there's a sync client that's installed in the Linux workspaces. You'd simply use the browser client to do it. And you can just sync files between locations using WorkDocs for free. Cool. All right, there was a question on Twitch about does Amazon Linux Workspaces support multiple displays with a zero client or thin client? Yes, in general, we support 4 monitors. So obviously, the vendor hardware has to support 4 outputs on those devices, so you need to check that specific device. That is the same in the Windows environment. There is one exception, which is the graphics bundles. And then pretty much everything is kind of configurable to topology, however you want to set it up in terms of the different monitor displays. Just be aware that obviously expanding the amount of screen real estate you're streaming can then increase the amount of bandwidth that you need to be able to see those screens. All right, got a question in the back?
Yeah, so if you lose your connection, is your workspace still going to continue running? If you start a process, can you walk away from it and then come back to it?
Yeah, so you kind of want like screen functionality. So there's a couple of different answers. So for an always-on workspace, as the name implies, it is always on. And so if you are connected to an always-on workspace, lose connection, it just keeps running. So it runs, we bill by the month, it just runs all month. So it just is always there when you're not using it as well. So if you want to use that to start processes or do compile jobs and then walk away, that's probably the way to go. We also have the AutoStop workspace. And the AutoStop workspace, when you disconnect from it for a period of time, which you can set, ranges from an hour up to something ridiculous like 96 or 120 hours, it will stop. So, and what it does is it'll actually either do, depending on the type, it'll either do a shutdown, effectively like it'll just stop itself, or it'll do a hibernate. And then when you come back, it'll restart and reconnect. And so in those cases, you wouldn't necessarily have a process that was running. But of course, you're also not getting billed, which is pretty cool. And so folks kind of bounce back and forth. You can change at any time. So at any point, you can go into the APIs and change it, or to the console and say, OK, now I want an always-on or auto-stop. We also have a cost optimizer tool that's available. It's a bunch of Lambda functions. It will look at your workspaces and tell you which ones are at a point where it would be cheaper to run them in always on or auto stop. So people bounce back and forth constantly. And they actually have a bunch of automations that they built to do that kind of thing so that they're optimized both for what they need in terms of, let's say, compiles and processes, and what they actually want in terms of cost savings. Yeah, totally. So connection about Caltrain and tunnels. So there's actually a couple of different ways that we handle internet or network disruptions. One is what I described, which is if you're disconnected for an hour or more and you've got auto stop, then we stop it. If you're talking about just short interruptions, most of the time the session will resume. Within 5 or 10 seconds, if network comes back, your session will just start back up like nothing ever happened. There's a timeout, and you'll see, if you get to like 30 seconds, you'll see a pop-up that'll say, hey, we're seeing some problems. Do you want to disconnect, or do you want us to keep retrying? And then if you go long enough, then it will fully disconnect. And so you'll actually lose the session state at that point. But for a fair amount of the stuff that you'd see for little network blips, you don't really even have to think about it. Okay, see if we got anything else on the Twitch feed here. All right, also had a question about setting up a Linux workspace if you already have a Windows workspace with the same user. there is this concept with workspaces, which is each user gets a workspace. And this really comes down to this Active Directory kind of concept of each username is an Active Directory username. And of course, whether that's Samba or some other directory, but at the end of the day, each user is a user. And so we issue one workspace per user. And so the way that people solve having multiple workspaces per user, whether they're Linux or Windows or both, is by having either separate directories, separate usernames if they want to create new users, or using separate what we call Active Directory connectors. So Active Directory connector is a mechanism that lets you have a connector that speaks to a back-end Active Directory domain controller. That may be the canonical source of truth, but you can actually have 2 or more Active Directory connectors on the front end of it and issue those workspaces separately to those different ADC environments. In the Workspaces client, when you actually register the client, you register by putting in a reg code, and those reg codes are unique per Active Directory or per Active Directory connector in this case. So I can actually have the same back-end user who is kind of homed as one user in Active Directory in the kind of canonical domain controller and have multiple ADCs in front of that, where I have the end user then having multiple reg codes to get into their different workspaces. And the Workspaces client supports this. I don't know if you use it at all, but if he pops it open, you'll see a wide range of reg codes, I suspect, for your different workspaces. So if I look at, sorry, it's going to load the login page. Now it'll work. Manage registrations. So he's got different workspaces that he's running. Now these are probably not all in the same Active Directory user. Those are just different directories, but it shows up more or less the same way. It's kind of an involved answer, but there's an answer. One more question up here.
Weird edge case. Someone is using Oregon primarily. They go on a trip somewhere out of country. Latency becomes obnoxious. How difficult is it to migrate their workspace for the duration of their time in a remote office?
Right. So the question is about, can the workspace kind of follow me around, or can I move it? So there's not an automated way to do this. So obviously there's things like data sovereignty laws and other reasons we don't like to move customers' data on their behalf, as it were. But what we have customers do is they will launch another workspace, and then using WorkDocs, for example, as a mechanism to move data back and forth, or if they've got share drives or however they typically would have access, they can stand up a second workspace in 15 or 20 minutes, and then when they either decide they can shut the first one down or they can just put it in a hibernate state, and then the user is now connected to the other workspace. So it's something you do have to put a little effort and thought into thinking about, but the translation is really just about whether that data is accessible in some other network accessible location. Okay, well, it looks like we're finishing up.
Yeah, good. All right. All right, can you switch?
Oh yeah, you want to come back?
Yeah, let's come back and come back to the slides. Okay. Well, thanks, Nathan and Jeff. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Terrific. Terrific. Oh, great. Well, thanks very much for that. And again, just to quickly summarize, what we're announcing today is long-term support for Linux 2, which applies both to our server operating systems running in EC2, as well as a new workspace based on Linux. And the whole idea here is to make it easier for you to develop in the same environment that you're deploying at scale. And so that's really what the announcements are about today. But the evening is not over, so we're really just getting started. So we wanted to thank you guys for coming to this part of the event. We really appreciate it. At this point, we're going to move over into the happy hour area, where you can get some drinks, there's some food, and there's an opportunity to get hands-on with the technology. Okay, so we've got some demo stations out there. There is a contest. So for those of you that were listening during the session, there's an opportunity to win a Kindle Fire, as well as an Echo device. So we really appreciate, and remember, the engineers are here. They'd love to hear your feedback on this new innovation and let you guys just engage in the technology. Jeff will be here for a while as well, so ask him questions and let's dig in. So thank you very much for the time. We really appreciate everybody, and let's head over to the next part of the room. Thanks.